Hello and welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. I'm delighted to welcome along this week fashion creative, podcast host, speaker, model, writer, multi-hyphenate, Karen Arthur. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you.
How does it feel being a podcaster on the other side of the mic?
Well, I suppose I started this way, didn't I? I started chatting and then I became the chatter. I was a chatty and then I became a chatter and now I do both. So I like it. I think I like it because I haven't had to cram for this. Everything I say is coming out of my head and my heart. So we're all good. We're all good.
I think I first became aware of you when I saw the video documentary Menopause Stories made by Bronwyn Parker Rhodes. So that would be
Oh,
about 2 years ago. A lot has
yes.
happened for you since then.
Yeah.
But I think I just remember seeing you on there. There is just something about you in that documentary that is absolutely compelling, like just joy that was kind of coming out of you. And I think obviously you've got quite a distinctive style and
Mm,
sort of dress sense and everything. I
mm.
just thought, wow, who is this person? I want to sort of find out more about them.
Thank
How
you.
did you get involved in doing the documentary?
No.
How did you get to know Bronwyn?
Absolutely. She ended up in my inbox, I think.
Just out of nowhere.
No, not out of nowhere. She's a friend of a friend, and they introduced me via email, and it was all during COVID. And she
Mm.
said she was doing this documentary, and I'm like, yeah, all right. Which is the spirit of my life these days. It's like, have I done it? No. Do I want to do it? Yeah, okay.
Does it sound fun?
Does it sound like it'll be fun? Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to catch me on the right day, I suppose, because I also turn things down when I'm overwhelmed or I feel like I've been asked too much. Anyway, so she ended up in my house in Southeast London. And this is before I decided I was going to move. So when you said, oh, it was about 2 years ago, I suppose I'm thinking back to that time. So yeah, we had a great day. We had a great day, and she filmed some of those great bits, and it was just me talking about my life. Yeah, that's how I feel about my life. I feel like lots of things are opening up, have opened up. Some I've created, and the rest are snowballed, I suppose.
Yeah. Was that before you'd started the podcast,
No, no,
the
no.
Menopause Whilst Black podcast?
I started the podcast I thought about it in June 2020. In that whole time when we were in lockdown and lots of things were happening in America that we were
Mm.
captive to, and life-changing events, I would say, groundbreaking events in terms of anti-racism and Black Lives Matter. And I felt compelled to highlight the lack of diversity in the menopause space. And I also felt like I couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore. So although I hadn't thought, oh yeah, I'm going to start a podcast, it became very clear that was my path. So it didn't drop until the October, well, Menopause Awareness Month, as it goes.
Mm.
And that wasn't deliberate. That was just the way it worked out. That was me procrastinating and, um, imposter syndroming and,
Yeah. So
staring at
took a while
yeah,
to
it took a
percolate.
while to percolate. And then I asked 10 women, I think, 10 Black women to be on my podcast. And every single one of them said yes. And I thought, shit, I'm going to have to do it now, aren't I? So that's where. So I hadn't started the podcast then, and I certainly wasn't talking about it because even when I started it, I was quite kind of, oh, I can't tell anyone. I'll just tell my mates, kind of thing. So when we filmed, I was just talking my talk like I always do.
But it takes something to put yourself out there and be visible. And it same goes, I guess, for the podcast, right? You're putting yourself out there potentially for all to see and being very very vulnerable, and as are your guests.
Hmm.
I don't know. Do you ever feel that it's a huge kind of weight of responsibility being that very kind of visible public face and representation of?
When I feel the weight, I step away. I'm very good at
Mm.
that now. And I say no, which is why my podcast, like it's entering its 4th season, but you couldn't call it consistent in any way, shape, or form. You know, I
Well, same
tried
here.
to stick right. I tried to stick to the right. I'll do it every 2 weeks, and that was based on economics, because the podcasting platforms, the more you publish, the more it costs. That was basically it.
Mhm.
It wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm going to do. It didn't work that way. And life gets in the way, and people don't listen to them every 2 weeks anyway. So I kind of cut myself some slack. I'm very, very, very gentle with myself these days, because I spent decades telling myself off for not doing various things in various ways. So I don't do it anymore. But I've also discovered, after I did I don't know whether you've seen it. So there's a video on YouTube with me in my bra and knickers called A Star Like You.
That's a fantastic series. If no one's
It's
ever seen them,
amazing.
there are some really absolutely blow you away interviews on there.
Yeah, and so they contacted me in August 2019,
Mm.
and they did a shout out on Instagram asking their followers if they knew anyone over 50 who had a story to tell, and 3 people tagged me, and they had already had me on their list anyway. So they basically, the next week they were in London
So, Karen, come and
filming,
take all your clothes off and tell us your
literally,
story.
you know, and I did, and again, in the spirit of I haven't done that before, that sounds like fun, I'll do it. I didn't think it through. And because it happened so quickly, it's actually quite good that I didn't think it through. Because if I'd have thought you're going to be on the internet in your bra and knickers, I probably wouldn't have done it. But
I definitely wouldn't.
but it happened, and they are skilled interviewers. They'll ask you a question, and then you'll answer it, and then they'll ask you to expand, and the next thing you know, you're spilling your guts. And
It's
there's
almost like you're
something,
peeling off a layer of yourself along with
and
your
it's
each
literally that.
item of clothing.
And
Yeah.
that, I think that's the remit as well. So as you're getting undressed and you're standing there and you're vulnerable anyway, it's like in for a penny, in for a pound. And so that happened, and then they were gone. Lily and Elise, they're very, very inspirational mother and daughter duo. And then I went away for 2 weeks with my aunt, and then the video dropped the day I got back, and my inbox exploded. And that's because I was vulnerable. That's because all the stuff I worried about, like what I looked like, sharing too much information, TMI, all of that, fell by the wayside, because I still get messages uh, underneath the video in my inbox. People find me, people email me of all demographics, by the way, saying my story resonated so heavily with them. The story of anxiety, of depression, of menopause, of teaching, of stress, of being a strong Black woman, of being a woman, of responsibility, all of that stuff. And I realized after that that my vulnerability is my strength, and our vulnerability is our strength. The stuff that we worry about people knowing about, the shame that keeps us quiet, is actually the stuff that needs to come into the light, because that frees us. No one's got a hold over me. So yes, my sister asked me this actually. How do you feel now that you're in the limelight? Are you not worried? And I said, yeah, kind of, but as long as I'm true to me, as long as I'm not lying, you know, as long as
Yeah, you're not pretending to be
I'm
something you're not.
absolutely not. I'm living my life. I'm transparent about when I don't want to do something. I'm transparent about when things don't go right. I know the power of the internet and how social media is ostensibly smoke and mirrors.
Mm.
And I am aware that when I try to keep it as real as possible, I feel so strongly about showing up as my wanky phrase incoming true authentic self, because I know that it empowers other people to do the same. I
Yeah.
know this, and that permeates into the way I dress. She says, sitting here in a grey top. This grey top's because I'm going to go.
So I tried to wear the happiest things that I could
And
find
I
because
can't see you.
I know, and our video isn't working.
I know.
But literally, I'm the kind of the most amount of black or navy blue or grey in my wardrobe. So
So this
yeah,
is
I've got my
my
bright green cardigan on. That's the
right.
best I could do for
That's
you, Karen.
great, but I'm wearing grey. This is my running gear. So I thought if I put my running gear on now, then I'm more
You'll
likely
go
to
for a
go.
run.
Right, so
Yeah,
that's why I'm wearing.
I have to exercise first thing in the morning, otherwise
Well, I
all
normally
bets are
do.
off.
I normally do, and as far as I'm concerned, this is first thing in the morning, so allow it. Yeah, from what I wear to what I talk about. Yeah, I think these things are important. We put society puts us in boxes, and then we kind of stay there because they're comfortable, even though they're not serving us.
Or
You
we're
know?
conditioned to, because I
Yeah.
think the part about saying no to what doesn't bring you joy and making time
Mm.
and prioritizing rest is something a lot of us are particularly bad at.
Oh, it's hard. It's hard. It's so hard. And I've spent the last, I'd say, 8 years unlearning, 7 years since I had my breakdown and left teaching. Unlearning that.
The
Just,
conditioning, the
it's
social
so much.
conditioning. Yeah.
So much. So much. And that's hard in itself. Unlearning is hard because you want to scurry back into your comfort zone because
Do you miss
because it's
teaching?
comfortable. I miss the kids.
Mm.
I miss, and in a sense, I am a teacher. I go into teach. My teaching mode is my default mode. I'm an educator. I miss the classroom. If I go into a school, I feel comfortable, and kids are incredible. They keep you on your toes. They're just there's just nothing like it. And in fact, when I was teaching, my favourite bit was being in the classroom with the kids when no one could get at us, no red tape, no politics, just us, talking, learning. Yeah, I loved it. But I do not miss the other stuff that
No.
made it impossible for me, which was one of the things, sorry, that made it impossible for me to say. And that's lack of resources, that's the constant stress, that's parents
Yeah. Well, the
demand,
goalposts are
the
always moving
government.
as well, I think, aren't
Yeah,
they? And
it's not
yeah,
it's not a game. I want to say it's a young person's game. What I'm going to say is it's a game for someone with more energy, but unfortunately the way that it is advertised and promoted is for people who can do that for a bit and then go and do something else. Even in the word teach first, for example, that campaign, it implies that you do that first and then you go and get a real job. And that isn't like when I went into teaching, you stayed in teaching, and I never thought I would leave it. Never thought I would leave it. Couldn't imagine doing what I'm doing now. So, yeah.
how was it for you kind of reinventing yourself after teaching? Happened over a kind of a long
Mm.
period of time, and was it sort of like a gradual process of working out who you were if you weren't a teacher?
Yeah, I floundered. I plummeted, I would say, spiraled, any of those words. I didn't realise I was doing it. I realised I was spiralling, but I didn't realise I was reinventing myself. But I did make a conscious decision to curate the next 50 years on a good day the way I wanted it. I was never going to do a job I hated, or never going to do a job that was going to create that much stress. I wanted to do what I loved, but I had to get better first. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression in February 2015. I was still off work at the time and I was trying to get better to go back to work. That was my goal because it didn't occur to me that I could leave teaching. That's a lie. It occurred to me, but not ill. I wanted to, if I was going to leave it, I wanted to leave it on a high. I didn't recognise how ill I was. And I didn't recognise that it was partly due to menopause, partly due to conditioning, all sorts of childhood trauma, you name it, an abusive relationship, etc., etc. So what I did is I went into therapy. I'd put it off for ages. I needed therapy for years, And in fact, when I split with my partner in 2006, 2007, and what I did is I threw my energies at keeping my job, being the best I could at my job, and put my girls into therapy. That's what I did. And I changed
Look after everyone else
right,
first.
right. And I changed my will, and I got the house in my name, and I did all the practical stuff and ignored myself. And I had a kind of a mini breakdown a couple of years later. But I felt so guilty when I was off work. I was only off work for a week. I felt so guilty. I forced myself back to work. That was like the precursor, the foreplay, if you like, for the big event in 2015. But it became very clear that the thing about therapy is it's expensive.
Oh yeah.
And I think that
It's
therapy
a
should be
luxury,
free.
isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a luxury that many
for many it's a
will
luxury.
never, unaffordable.
And it shouldn't be seen as that. It should be seen as a necessity. We should think about therapy like, I don't know, our utility bill. Because literally it does, we do shut down if we don't attend to our mind. But I know that I did it because I had the money. I had some savings. I felt like I didn't have any choice in terms of if I was going to get better. And the money was there, and it was expensive, but it was like, that's what I'm
It's
going to
an
spend my money on.
investment in
Yeah. And
in
I
you.
also thought at the time, I've said this several times, I thought I'd go for 6 weeks and then I'd be fixed. I thought, oh, I'll do a couple of months of this and then I'll be better. And then I'll come out and I'll be this amazing badass freelance person, which I also had massive misconceptions about. And I was in therapy for 3 years. And it's the best, hands down, the best money I've ever spent on myself. Like ever. And I also haven't ruled out going back, but I think I have many more tools in my mental health toolkit, as we're going to call it. And so when I feel, if I get an inkling that something is wrong, I've got loads of things I can do. And often it's usually external and it's completely surmountable and I can step away. So, but I think that the government needs to chuck money at mental well-being services for everybody, not just, like I said, I could afford it, and if I decide to go back again, I can. But actually, and I also had a black therapist, and I didn't know how important that would become until a year in. Because you go into therapy thinking you're going to talk about one thing, and you end up talking about something completely different, and it's usually your dad.
It's a revelation.
So I went in to unpick my upset about about leaving work and not being a teacher, but it was so much more complicated than that. And your therapist will see that, because that's why people say, I don't need therapy, I just need good friends. No, you don't. They're not qualified, they're not trained.
No.
And the therapist will call you out on your bullshit, a good one. And this is what my lovely therapist did. And the reason it was important for her to be black was because we started on the same page. I never had to explain my experience to her because she had lived my experience. And so we were already comfortable. Certainly I was comfortable with her. And I can articulate that now, but I couldn't when I first started. I just knew that when I walked into a room, because I shopped around. You should shop around for your therapist if anybody's listening and is looking into going into therapy. Don't assume you have to go with the first one.
No, you've got to have that rapport, haven't you?
Yeah, and you can try for 2 or 3, 4 sessions and think, yeah, no, this isn't for me. And don't second guess yourself, because we think, oh, well, I need to stick at it. Because often for people, going to therapy is a massive step. And so once they've done it, it's like, okay, I'm here now, fix me.
Yeah.
And
Or it's almost like if you have a not great haircut, you feel like you have to be like, oh yeah, it's lovely.
Right. And then go home and cry.
Yeah. Like, no, you're paying the money for this.
God.
It needs to work for you. Don't just
That's
kind of
so
shuffle off
true.
apologetically.
And as women, we do that so much. We don't speak our mind because we're not encouraged to speak our mind.
But that is part of the,
deep.
I think, the aging process is kind of, you start to shed that, whatever those inhibitions about being, as you say, unapologetically kind of you and authentic and going, no, I hate it.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's been an interesting process. It is an interesting process because it doesn't stop. When you start to grow, you just keep growing, and you start to notice things, and then you can't unsee them, and you can't go back. Like, telling the truth is addictive. Being honest is addictive. I vowed when I split with my partner, I was with him for 20 years. I vowed that I would be honest with myself. No, I vowed that I'd be honest with my next partner. But actually, that translated to, as I left teaching, it turned into, I'll be honest with myself first, because often we lie to
Mm.
ourselves. We kid ourselves that this is what we really want, because we lose touch of our intuition, and we think a gut feeling is just insecurity or sensitivity, and it's not. Your gut feeling is, when it's like, when I've taken my kids out, for example, let's say we go for a meal when they were younger, and we walk in and sit down, and say it was dark, or the waiter was ignoring us, and my girls got to know. They'd look at me and they wouldn't get too comfortable, because they'd go, "We're not staying here, are we?" And I go, "Yeah, there's an energy about it. It's like, I've spent years wondering why someone didn't like me, but sometimes you just don't vibe with people, and it's not necessarily about you. It's just that." I believe that you're not connecting, and that's fine. So I don't go anywhere that doesn't feel me. And if I walk into somewhere and I'm not feeling it, or something doesn't feel right, I'm leaving. It's
Yeah,
as
but it
simple as
comes
that.
comes back to the saying no thing again, doesn't it? We get so kind of inured in this kind of process of saying everything's fine. No, of course I'll do that when you don't want to do that, and so ultimately you drift further and further away from the kind of the core of what you actually want.
But the other thing is also that, yeah, absolutely. Love the word inured, by the way. I'm going to put that into a sentence today. If I speak to another human being, I'm going to find a way to put it in. But, and I will say that we also, if we hide from what's really going on, it's comforting, because if you really open your eyes to being unhappy, then it means that you've got to do something about it. And doing something about it is scary. It's really
Yeah.
scary. And so we just go, "Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'll go on holiday, or I'll buy this bag, or I'll take myself out, or I'll get drunk, or whatever." Because that's
Fill the
much,
hole with
much,
something else.
it's much, much easier than admitting that your life no longer serves you. But you're allowed to change your mind. As human beings, as adults, we're allowed to say, "Okay, yeah, I made that decision, but actually that's not no longer working, so I don't want to do that." Because we don't stay the same. We change, we grow, and that's okay.
Mm.
You know.
I think that's a really interesting point, and it kind of comes back to our focus, I guess, in a sort of Western society on fear of failure and not being able to experiment and try new things and say, "Oh, actually, that didn't work," or "No, I didn't actually enjoy it in the end,
Mm,
so I'm going to do something else now." It's almost like it's kind of hard to admit that you've
mm.
gone down the wrong path.
But I don't think there are any wrong paths. I really don't. I think that your path is your path, and I think that years ago when I started my business, I made bags. Or it was a hobby more than a business. I hardly made any money, but then when I left teaching, I threw myself into being a freelancer. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to work for myself. It's going to be great. And all that happens is that you work all the time, and then you're ill in a different way. But you're also working for yourself, and you haven't got a salary coming in every month. And I read somewhere that you're supposed to fail. That having a
Yeah.
living is a series of failings. And I knew that. I was like, "Oh, I'm not doing that then. I don't want to fail." But there are no failures. Failures are lessons. They're lessons. And I just, now I look back on let's go for the last 7 years. Let's go for the last 60, for God's sake. We're not here all day. But I realised that I failed upwards. The things that I learned from what I did means that I won't do those again. I'll go in different directions. So I think that society has this thing around success and failure. But what is
Mm.
success? My success is the fact that I'm gonna run at midday instead of 8 o'clock this morning, or somebody else's success might be getting out of bed. Somebody's success might be making 5 figures in a day or that kind of thing. But you have to define your own version of success and go with that. That's what I think.
Yeah. I think that's another area where social media is not necessarily serving us well, because we have so many other versions of success to look at and compare ourselves to and find ourselves wanting.
You have to be very careful with social media, and you have to go in knowing that whilst it is a connector, can be a connector in many ways. I've made many friends on Instagram in particular. It can also make us feel completely inadequate. And so when you recognize that, really, let's take Instagram and TikTok, they're not there for entertainment, they're selling tools. People have gotten hold of that. Once you know that, I think it can be easier to kind of try and step away. And also that these apps are invented to keep us on our phones. They're supposed to be addictive, and beating yourself up for the fact that you're on TikTok, let's say 5 hours a day, which sounds a lot, but isn't a lot for many. There's no point, because if you are, it's doing its job. And it takes a lot of strength of character, reminders in your phone, timers telling you to turn it off, stepping out into the real world to remind you that that those little apps are there to make us spend more money through fear of not being in the know or on trend or all that kind of stuff. And I do that. I say this like I'm some kind of guru, that I'm not, that I don't do these things. Of course I do these things. I like Instagram, and
We're all there for the doom scrolling and the,
right, and
last thing at night. Oh
yeah,
God.
I've just discovered. I've just moved to TikTok. I've got like 4 videos on TikTok, maybe 5, and I've got about 12 followers, and I'm having the time of my life. But I'm also very, very aware of how that's even more addictive than Instagram, and I didn't think that was possible. So but I don't beat myself up about it. I'm like, you know what? I'm new here. I'm learning
Just
some
gonna play.
things. It's great, and now let me step and go and look at the seals.
I'm going to go off on a tangent. So there's a lot, and you kind of, you've talked a bit about Instagram, and there is a kind of a big community on there in terms of sort of talking about perimenopause, menopause, and midlife. We don't hear as much about post menopause and what's kind of going on the other side. Do you consider yourself sort of post-menopausal now? Do you feel very much different than you did?
I'm unrecognisable from the person I was even 3 years ago, I'd say. And I'm better for it. I am postmenopausal. Postmenopausal is like the day after you. Menopause is one day, and then you're postmenopausal. I'm postmenopausal. I take HRT. I also have changed my way I eat. My exercise regime, don't like that word. My exercise thing that I do is more intuitive. I think differently. My boundaries are incredible. My relationship boundaries and my work boundaries and my boundaries with myself, in terms of saying, yeah, Karen, and being kinder to myself. And I think there's 2 things, isn't there? I mean, postmenopausal women are in their, like, let's say late 50s, 60s, so they're unlearning more. We're unlearning more, and some of us don't want to unlearn that stuff. It's too much.
Painful,
It's
difficult.
painful. So and also some of us don't like social media. Social media we're just not on it. We're just living our lives, getting on with it. So
Believe it or not, there is a
you know,
life outside of Instagram.
yeah.
You don't have to be on it.
We also have to remember that the media amplifies who they want to amplify, and often they amplify the stories, the things that can sell their papers or get hits onto their websites and stuff like that. So there's a lot of talk about menopause, and the celebrities. I was described as a celebrity in a list the other day, and it did make me laugh. I was like, that's really not what I am, but you go off, sis. But are making a lot of noise. But as they should. But also, there are lots of people who aren't talking about menopause, and when there are loads of people we're not reaching, and they may be the people who really need, equality in menopause care to be ramped up. People are still going to the doctor's experience in menopause and being told they're too young, or be told they're not allowed to have HRT, or if they want it, or that this is still happening. There are people who still don't know that the fact that they're feeling that they can't do their job, or they feel brain fog, or their body is changing, is down to menopause, because no one in their family is talking about it, whether culturally or whether because it's not a thing they chat about. So I postmenopause can be liberating. It can be, for me, it has been liberating and freeing, and I am enjoying aging. I'm working on some things, I think I look one way, and then I pass a mirror and I'm like, fuck, who is that?
You get the wrong angle with some really bad lighting, and you just like, oh my God. You also moved to the coast, to the seaside, as I like to put it, which I'm very envious about. Was that sort of part of your kind of transformation process, reevaluating kind of what you wanted your next chapter to be?
Well, that urge only started. I always knew I wasn't going to end up in London. I knew that. But I always thought I'd move closer to my mum. My mum lives in Oxfordshire. So I thought, I'll go and live in the countryside. But I didn't have any specific plan. I remember putting something on Instagram about wanting a big cottage and holding retreats and stuff like that. And I put a picture of this lovely cottage that I'd found. I don't know whose it is, by the way. I'm sorry if it's
just
yours.
manifesting that cottage.
So I knew I was going to leave. But during COVID, I spent a lot of time on Rightmove looking at villas in Barbados, if I'm honest. And then I became more and more clear about needing space and sea. And then it was something I couldn't stop thinking about. And the next thing, so I went on, what happened? October 20, where are we? 21. I kept seeing this particular retreat kept coming up. Jessica Huey runs the Purpose Retreat. It's in Jamaica. And I knew it existed. I'm not going to lie. And it's a lot of money. And the reason I say that is because at the time, when the first time I saw it, I thought, I can't afford that. That's not for me. That's for other people. But it kept coming up, and then it kept coming up, and I thought, you know what, I'm going. The money will come. And this is my attitude to most things. Is that I believe that money is energy. I think that's a bit woo-woo for some people, but I journal heavily and I write about what I want. And I wanted to go on this retreat, and so I paid for it on my credit card, and then the money did come, let's just say. And so I ended up in Jamaica. And before I went in January 2020, this year, and we did various exercises, and one of the things was about something to do when you get back that you have been putting off. And I said, oh, well, when I get back, I'm going to put my house on the market in like June. And my accountability partner was happened to be somebody who's been in property for like 25 years. And she said,
handy.
She said, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
If not now, when? And I couldn't think of a good answer. So when I got back on January the 20th, I had already, this is the thing, I'd already seen estate agent, so I kind of was ready. I'd already had the house valued, and so I put it on the market. And
just
then
needed that little push.
Yeah. And I looked at where I wanted to go, and I wanted somewhere where there was an established creative community. I wanted a little bit of diversity, but I wanted sea. That was really important to me. And 9 months later, I'm here. So it's a year since I thought about putting the house on the market and moving to the seaside. And not everybody, a lot of people, when you try to change your life, when you decide to change your life and be different, lots of people are rooting for me, and that's great. But you get, people who are worried for you, understandably. It comes from a place of love. Or they're like, they give you your fears. So there was like, well, why don't you rent it? I'm like, I don't need that pressure. Once I'm done, I'm done, you know. I don't want to rent it. Oh, you'll never be able to move back to London. That's the point. I don't care. So yeah, so I put it on the market and it took ages. Another thing, it took a while to sell. I decided it would sell immediately, and it didn't. And then I got an offer. I just decided, well, I'm leaving anyway. I'm going to get rid of, I think I got rid of 95% of my possessions, which is huge. But I suppose once I'd made the decision, it kind of snowballed. And then I got a decent offer. Two offers fell through basically, and then I got another offer months later, and it was higher than the other two. And I went for it. And then they wanted a very quick sale. So I was gone by the 1st of September. And
Do you feel different having kind of let go of all of that stuff
yeah,
and being where you are now in that sort of different environment?
it was daunting at first. And I looked at storage and I looked at how expensive it was. And then I did a poll on Instagram, and most people said, don't do it. Because you end up paying for 2 years and then you go back to your place and you get rid of it anyway.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, I'm just going to, like, I had a lot of clothes that I absolutely loved, clothes I was keeping as well.
Just in case.
I just
Or
couldn't get rid of
just
them.
couldn't.
I loved
What,
them.
emotionally attached to.
We're emotionally attached to a lot of our clothing. And I'd made a lot of my wardrobe as well. So it was vintage, some made, some very expensive stuff from when I had a regular salary. But I thought, well, so these will make somebody else happy. So I had some open houses and I gave some clothes away and I gave some to charity and then I put some, I remember I put some artwork outside. I had a lot of big jazz artwork and it was bin day and one of the bin men said, are you giving those away? And I went, yeah. He said, can I, what, for free? And I went, yes, do you want them? He said, yeah. So he was so excited that he'd seen, I think it was a big framed poster of Miles Davis. The man was beside himself. Listen, giving that kind of joy out into the world, don't we all need more joy?
Definitely.
And so that's what I did. And it feels, I've moved to a much smaller place. I'm renting at the moment. I'm looking to buy. Every now and then I get up and I go, oh, I can't wear that anymore because I don't have it. But on the whole, it just feels it's cathartic. It's cathartic because bottom line, I just need warmth, shelter, and food and love.
Yeah.
I got all those things.
What one thing do you wish you had known about going into that sort of perimenopause transition, or would you not do any of it differently?
I wouldn't do it differently. But that's because, as I said before,
Yeah.
you know, your path is your path. What happens, happens. And everything that's happened to me in the way that it's happened has made me the person who's talking to you now. However, if someone had taken it upon themselves to tell me that mental well-being was linked to estrogen and, you know, menopause, I might have sat up and taken notice. Like, no one was talking about the links between mental well-being and menopause, and that's a big thing.
It is a biggie.
It's a biggie.
It's
So,
changing, but
it is changing.
I think there's still a really, really long way
I
to
will
go.
say it's changing, but there is still a lot of talk when we talk about menopause. We talk about the symptoms, the hot flushes, the tingly, the brain fog. It's related to not being able to do your job. And I'm not really here for that. I get it, but I also think we need to be taking care of ourselves from the get-go, and we need to be encouraging young women to be, or young people who are going to go through menopause, to be doing things that, moving towards doing things that they love and not trying to get into a rat race that will not serve them. And that's easier said than done. obviously. I'm saying it from the other side. But we must stop thinking about menopause as being an old person's conversation. It is a conversation to be had. It needs normalising, you know?
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And it's all tied up with those, some of the things that we've been talking about deeply prioritizing yourself, deeply knowing yourself, and
that
putting
knowing
so much of
yourself.
that energy, putting all that energy into things that don't bring you joy. You talk a lot about that, the joy, the kind of wearing you're happy, yeah.
That
We do so many things that take that away from ourselves.
That's two things. Seeking joy is important. This world is a mess. Let's not
find your joy if you can unearth it.
So
anywhere.
Seek joy wherever you can find it. That's number one. But I would say knowing yourself is key. And I didn't learn myself. I didn't study myself until I had my breakdown, because I was forced to. And my point is, I don't want anybody to be in the position I was 7-8 years ago. If you start to really listen to, and knowing yourself is about knowing what foods trigger you. Like I know that if I eat a family bag of crisps, they don't call them family bags anymore, they're just crisps. But if I eat that one day, like at 8 o'clock at night watching All That Glitters or whatever, which is a fantastic jewelry show that I'm waiting for series 3. You can cut that out, but I'm just saying. If I do that, the next day, my face is going to be puffy. I'm going to feel sluggish. I'm going to feel bloated. I might feel a little bit guilty. I know this. But that doesn't mean it stops me. It just means I know.
You choose. Yeah, you go
it's
here
a choice.
Eyes wide open.
This is my point, whereas often we do things, we put ourselves in situations, we find ourselves in situations, we eat things that don't serve us, and we don't know because we're not listening. That's the difference. So I'm not saying don't eat those crisps. Eat those crisps, babes. This is your permission.
On you go.
But be aware that these are the things that it's going to trigger, and these are the things that it's going to do. So I would say maybe not do it every night, but, cut yourself some slack. But knowing yourself is important, and I'm thrilled that I was able to take the time to do that, because, it's huge.
Well, I can't think of a better place to bring it to a close. No, genuinely, I think.
Well, I'm telling people to eat family bags of crisps.
It's very important. But
I love it.
But I think we do kind of hear over and over again that menopause, transition, whatever, what used to be called your midlife crisis, is a place where we start to figure out some stuff about ourselves because we are forced to do that. And actually, you can go figure some of that stuff out before you are in crisis mode. And we encourage you to spend time prioritizing yourself and doing just that.
I would say that menopause is not a death sentence. It's not to be feared. I meet too many women, young women, women my children's age who are like 27 and 32, who are scared of menopause. And then or they've seen what I do and seen what other people do, and then they're, oh, okay, this is something I might be able to look forward to. Absolutely. Yeah. Aging isn't the problem. It's how we approach it that's the problem, So go out there and grab life by the short and curlies. It's there for living.
Go find your joy.
I believe I
Karen
said
and
that.
I say so. Oh, thank you so much. I'm very, very grateful that you said yes to our interview and not no. And it has been an absolute joy.
No, it's been great. It's been a lovely little conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live. And why not visit the blog at www.middlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.